Welcome to this week's episode of Step Live Online, production of University of Hawaii Presents, based at the University of Hawaii at Manoa Outreach College. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the University of Hawaii, and Kainoa Senior Services. We're excited to have you join us this week. We were off the air last week, but are happy to be back. We love to stay in touch, so give us comments and questions through today's chat window and let us know what you're thinking. Also, if you send your email to csinfo@hawaii.edu, you'll get notices about upcoming programs. Today, we are happy to have local boy Alton Takiyama-Chung. Alton grew up with the stories, superstitions, and the magic of the Hawaiian Islands. He tells stories of the Plantation Days, Japanese-American experiences of World War II, Asian folktales, Hawaiian legends, and of course, ghost stories. He has been a feature teller at the National Storytelling Festival and at international storytelling festivals in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, Vietnam, India, and Thailand. He's also former chairman of the board of directors of the National Storytelling Network, the national organization for U.S. storytellers. So, without further ado, join me in welcoming Alton Chung.
Thank you so very much. And thank you for joining us all today. Today is Folktales Day. I've got folktales from all over the world. And so let us just begin. Our first folktale comes from Korea. Now, United States and Europe, we also begin stories with once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a far and distant land. But in Korea, they begin stories with Yanal, Yanal, Aduyinare. Once, there was a very rich family, and they had an only child. And this boy loved stories. Whenever he met a new person, he said, oh, please, tell me a story, tell me a story. And he'd take that story, and he'd put it in a little bag. He always carried a little bag with him. He always collected stories, and he stuffed it in a little bag. He kept stuffing stories in the bag until there was no more room to put that story in the bag. And he didn't want the stories to escape, so he tied it really tight. This young man grew up to become a handsome young man. And it soon became time for him to take a wife. And a bride was chosen for him, and the house was preparing to greet the new young master's new wife. Now, it just so happened that there was a faithful old servant who had served the family for years and knew the young master was a little boy. Now he was elderly, and everyone was rushing around trying to go and get the house ready for the wedding celebration, and he was given the task of tending the kitchen fire. This old man sat there and tended the fire, and he heard this whispering. He looked around, there's no one else in the kitchen, and he tracked the sound down. It came from an old bag hung on a nail behind the kitchen door. And he listened carefully. Now listen, everybody. That boy's wedding is tomorrow. And he has stuffed us in this bag and held us for so long we can barely move. We've suffered too long. But guess what? I found a hole in the bag. Now we can pay him back for all that he's done to us. Oh, yes, and tomorrow I'm going to go and turn myself into a bush of beautiful red berries. Be right on the path while he proceeds to his wife's house. I'll look so delicious, so yummy. He'll stop if he eats me. I will make him very sick. Oh, and if that doesn't work, I will turn myself into a bubbling, cool spring right by the side of the road. And inside of me, I'll put a little dipper, and it'll float on top of the water. Oh, and I'll be so delicious. But if he drinks from me, he will get even thicker. Oh, and I will turn myself into a red-hot poker, and I will hide myself in that bag of chaff. And so when he steps off his horse and onto that bag of chaff, I will come up right to his foot, and I will burn him and cripple him. You see, in Korea, they would have a bag of chaff so that boy would never be able to step onto the ground when he dismounts from his horse. And if all of you should fail, I will turn myself into many poisonous snakes. Then I will hide myself in the bridal chamber. And when the boy and his bride fall asleep, I will come out and poison them. Oh. The old servant said, oh, what can I do? What can I do? Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. No, I must come up with a plan to save the young master. Well, next morning, all final preparations were made, and the wedding procession was about to begin when that old servant rushed out and he grabbed hold of the bridle of the young master's horse. He refused to let anyone else carry this horse. He would lead the young master's horse himself. Oh, old man, no, please. Go back inside. This is a long journey. No, you have done your time. Go rest and stay in the kitchen. No, young master, I must do this. This is my honor. He could not be dissuaded. So off they went. And they went along, and soon they came along the path. They saw this beautiful bush of luscious red berries. Oh, they look so sweet. They look so delicious. And the young man said, oh, wait. I am so hungry. Oh, those berries look so delicious. Oh, please, stop. I must have some of them. But the old man, he wouldn't stop. He kept leading that horse forward. Oh, those berries? Oh, no, master, man. No. Those berries, those are sour, master. There are sweeter ones up ahead. But I'm so hungry. Oh. The old man led the horse further along. And they came along to a little spring, a spring with rocks laid around it, and it bubbled. It looked cool and delicious, and floating in the top of that little spring was a little gourd, a dipper gourd. Oh, it looked so inviting. Oh, please, I am thirsty. I'm thirsty. Please stop. Oh, that water looks so delicious. Please, I'm thirsty. Please stop. Old man wouldn't stop. No, master. No, it is the sun. Wait until we get into the shade, and your thirst will go away. But I'm thirsty now. The old man continued to lead the young master's horse till they got to his wife's home. And there, everyone was lined up. There were carpets laid out. Again, right there was that bag of chaff, rice chaff, so that the young master could dismount from his horse, never touch the ground as he walked across the carpets into his wife's home. Well, as that young master almost began to dismount from his horse, that old servant nudged the old young master. So he tripped and he fell. His foot did not land on that bag of chaff, and he fell sprawling on top of the carpet. He was so ashamed and so embarrassed. He was so clumsy. He got up. He dusted himself off. He didn't dare berate his servant in front of everyone here, and everyone's just trying not to laugh. He gathered up his dignity, and he walked into his new wife's home. Oh, the wedding ceremony was wonderful. Oh, everyone was so gracious, and a good time was had by all. And then it came time for the procession back to the young master's home. Well, they got there, and again, there was a lavish celebration. Everyone was having a wonderful time. And came to the time where the young master and his new bride would retire to their bridal chamber. And as they did, that old servant stood in the shadows under the veranda outside of the bedroom chamber with a sword. And he waited till the light was doused in the bridal chamber. And then that old servant opened the door and stepped in. Oh, what are you doing? Young master, I'm sorry. Light a candle and get out. And so the young master did, and he and his wife were terrified. Here is this old servant with a sword. And they lit a candle, and that old man, he kicked aside the bedding, and there, underneath the bed, were hundreds coiling red and black snakes, hissing. Well, that old man, he laid into them with their sword, slashing them, cutting them. Oh, they tried to bite him, but he continued to slash and kill. And some of them tried to escape, and they hunted them down, and he killed them all. And at last, when all was done, that old man went to his master and said, "Oh, you see, master, stories must never be stored away. They can become mean and spiteful. No, Master. They must always be shared with other people. That way they can be passed on from one person to another so everyone can enjoy them. That young master hung his head. He said, oh, I am sorry. I did not know. And he vowed to go and share all the stories that he had ever collected with everyone, just as I have done with all of you just now. That's our first story. Our second story comes from Africa. It's an old Lawrence Vanderpost story. It was written down in a book called Tales from the African Bush. I first heard it from a person by the name of Angela Arians. So she's a Jungian psychologist and a cantadora, or a Basque storyteller. And it goes something like this. Long time ago, a tale that is older than the pine needles in the tree. In a land that's east of the sun and west of the moon, there was a village. And in this village, there lived a black Nubian woman. Oh, she was known for her grace and her poise and her dignity, and she dressed in a magnificent red toga. But the thing that this woman was most known for in this village was her magnificent necklace of juju beads. For it was the custom of the women of this village to go and gather juju beads and form necklaces. And this woman had created the most exquisite, most beautiful necklace that anyone had ever seen. And all the women of the village, they got a little jealous of this black Nubian woman. And they vowed somehow that they would cause her to lose that necklace. And whenever this black Nubian woman walked through the village on her errands, all the women would turn and whisper behind her back. This black Nubian woman saw this, and she did not know what she had done to offend these women. But being the woman that she was, she carried herself with her grace and her dignity, and she went on her way. Now, Friday was laundry day, and that's when all the women of the village would gather up all their clothes, their laundry, take them down to the river, where they'd wash them and dry them on the bank. And on this particular Friday, that black Nubian woman, she gathered up her laundry in her basket and put it upon her, carried it down she went to the river, and there she saw all the other women in the village, their clothes drying on the bank, and the women were in the river there in the shallows, splashing and laughing and having a good time. And when that black Nubian woman arrived, all the women of the village turned and stopped and looked at her. And one of them stepped forward and said, "We know that we have been unkind to you, and we are sorry. Oh, won't you come into the river with us? Won't you come into the river with us?" That black Nubian woman thought, oh, what a glorious day. Oh, yes. For today, she would be accepted once again into that sisterhood. Oh, what a wonderful day. And so she put her basket down and she walked into the river, and she noticed that all the other women were not wearing their necklace of juju beads. And she said, oh, where have you put your necklaces? 'Cause I would like to put my necklace with all of yours. And they said, oh, this morning we had a wonderful ceremony. We got all of our necklaces and we offered them to the gods of the river. Oh, what a wonderful ceremony. What a wonderful thought, the black Nubian woman thought. And she carefully took off her necklace. She said, I too would like to offer my necklace to the gods of the river. With a great prayer, she picked up her necklace and she hurled it into the river, and it landed with a great splash. And then all the women of the village turned at her, and they laughed at her, and they jeered at her, and they said, would you think we would be so stupid? Do you think we'd be so stupid as to throw our necklaces in the river? Ha! And they splashed her with water, and they went to the banks, and they dug into the mud where they put up their own necklaces, and they washed them, and they put on their own necklaces, and they laughed at her, and they splashed her with more water, and they gathered up all their laundry, and they went back up to the village. That black Nubian woman, she kneeled down on that riverbank, and she wept, and she wept, and she wept.
Then she gathered up her drying laundry and walked along the banks of the river, wishing the great prayer, "Oh, please, please, give me back my necklace. Give me back my necklace." And as she walked along, she thought she heard something. Just the gurgles of the river. She continued to walk along, but she heard it again. Plunge in. Plunge in. And that black Nubian woman, being the woman that she was, she put down her box of laundry. And she plunged into the river. She jumped into the river and down, down, down she went until she reached the bottom of the river. And there, when the mud cleared, she looked around, and there, not a dozen paces away from her, she saw an old woman covered with oozing sores. And this old woman held out her hand and said, "Lick my sores. Lick my sores." Black Nubian woman, being the woman she was taken aback, but on her hands and knees, she crawled toward this old woman, and she took her hand and she licked one of her sores. And then something magical happened. All the sores on this old woman just healed up. And she grew tall, and she grew erect, and her face became radiant, it became luminous. And there stood the old woman of the river. And she looked at that black Nubian woman and said, "Thank you. Thank you for your compassion. Thank you for your ability to heal." And then they heard footsteps coming down the riverbed. And that old woman of the river, she grabbed hold of that black Nubian woman and she said, "Hide down in my riverbed coats. Hide yourself down in my riverbed coats." And she took her and she pushed her down into the mud. And then the footsteps came running. It was the demon. It was the old demon of the river. And he came running up and said, "Old woman, I smell young woman in my river. I smell the blood of a young woman in my river. Where is she, old woman?" That old woman of the river, she looked at that old demon. She said, "You'll never catch her, you old demon. She went downriver 2 hours ago. You'll never catch her." And that old demon, he ran down that riverbed till he was out of sight. And that old woman, she reached down to riverbed coats. She pulled that black Nubian woman up out of the riverbed. And then she reached down into that mud and she pulled out a necklace. But it was no ordinary necklace. It was the most exquisite necklace anyone had ever seen. It was made of gold and silver and diamonds and rubies, and she placed it around the neck of that black Nubian woman. And then that woman of the river, she clapped her hands, and the river opened up, and that black Nubian woman was tossed out of the river. She was tossed out of the river onto the riverbed bank. And that old woman of the river, she clapped her hands again, and this magnificent white toga came out of the river foam and landed on the bank next to the black Nubian woman. And that old woman of the river, she clapped her hands again, and this magnificent white basket launched itself and landed next to that magnificent white toga. And that old woman of the river, she clapped her hands again, and the river closed up and went back to its normal gurgles. And that black Nubian woman, she dressed herself in that fine white toga. And she picked up that white basket and put it upon her head. And she fingered that gorgeous necklace of gold and silver and diamonds and rubies. And she walked along that riverbed. She walked along that riverbank, and she looked down to the river. She looked down to the river, and she saw her own reflection. And she saw the truth of who she truly was. And she saw the truth of who she truly was. And she found the truth of who she truly was. And then she heard something. For you see, it was Friday again. It was wash day. And all the women of the village came down with their baskets of laundry, and they stopped, and they saw this beautiful and magnificent black Nubian woman dressed in this fine white toga with this white basket upon her head and this exquisite necklace made of silver and gold and diamonds and rubies. And they went, oh, and they walked around, and she touched it, and they touched the rubies, they touched the necklace, they touched the toga and the white basket. They said, oh, where did you get these magnificent things? And the black woman, Nubian woman, being the woman that she was, she just kind of pointed to the river. And the women turned and they ran to the river and they plunged into the river. But the woman, black Nubian woman, said, but wait. But it was too late. They had plunged into the river and down, down, down. All the women of the village went down, down to the very bottom of the river. And when the mud cleared, they saw not a dozen paces away from them an old, wrinkled up woman covered with open sores. This old woman looked at them and said, lick my sores. Lick my sores. And all the women in the village, they got together and said, ew, have you ever seen something so gross and hideous? Oh, ew. Then they heard footsteps coming down the riverbed. Footsteps coming down the river. It was that demon, that old demon of the river. And he found those women and he gobbled them all up. And he gobbled them all up. And he gobbled them all up. And their bones floated to the surface of the river. And in this long, long, long ago time, in the story found east of the sun, west of the moon, a story that's older than the pine needles of the tree, people lived well, and they died well. Now, from Africa, we go to Ireland. The next story I have for you, it's called The Piper's Revenge. It was written, there are many versions of this story. The version that I remember hearing is one by, that I remember reading was one by a man named Billy Tier. And so here, The Piper's Revenge. Long, long time ago, there was a piper. He came from Scotland, and he decided to go and spend the summer and months in Ireland. And he'd go and he'd walk from farm to farm, and he'd play his pipes, his bagpipes, and people would come, and they, at the end of the day, they'd stop what they're doing. They'd listen to his music. They'd have a grand time. They'd feed him, and more often than not, they'd allow him to go and spend an evening in their barns. And he sometimes gave him a few coins, and he earned his living this way. All summer long he played, and into the fall, the harvest season, it was wonderful times because the harvest was in, people wanted to celebrate. But it was an early winter, and the piper had stayed too long, and now he was trudging along these long country lanes, and it was snow on the ground. It was icy, it was bitter cold. Oh, you can see his breath. And he trudged in the snow. The snow was up to his knees, and he kept trudging in the snow in these lanes. Oh, the icicles hanging off of his hair, off of his eyebrows, off of his beard. Oh, he was so cold. His cloak was tattered by this time, and his shoes had holes in them. And with each step, the snow got packed more and more to the holes to his feet. He could almost not feel his feet. Oh, and the wind howled, and he trudged along in the cold, along the snowy bag, and all of a sudden, whoop, he tripped. It's a road. What did he trip over? And he dusted away the snow, and he saw a boot. It was a new boot. Oh, well, maybe this is a good day. A new boot. He needed a new boot. He picked up the boot. It was stuck. He couldn't budge it. Huh. But as he struggled, he noticed there was something else next to that boot in the snow. He dug away the snow. It was another boot. A pair of brand new boots there in the snow. He tried to pick that one up, and he couldn't punch it either. Huh. But as he thrashed around the snow, he said, there's something else in the snow. And he began digging away in the snow, and there are a pair of legs in those boots. Oh, he dug more, and he said, it was a body. Poor man. red hair, red beard, icicles covering his beard, his eyes, his hair, and a pair of brand new boots. He said, oh, poor man, he must have frozen. Well, I guess you really won't be needing those new boots now, will you? Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but speak up if you think you might need those boots. Oh, I guess I'll take that as a no. They tried to pull those boots off this frozen man, but they couldn't punch them because the feet were frozen inside the boots. But Piper, being a resourceful man, he had a toolkit in which he would use to go and repair his pipes, and in it was a little saw. And he went to work. And now he had this pair of brand new boots with feet inside of them, but he put them in his pack and off he went, trudging through the snow. It was getting dark, and he finally looked out. He saw a light way out in the distance. It was a farmhouse. It was the only light he had seen in a long time, so he trudged toward it. It was indeed an old farm. He went up to the door and he knocked on the door. The man opened doors. This farmer looked down at him, looked him up and down, and said, we'll have no likes of you around here. Don't be on your way. Be on your way. Oh. Piper knew when he wasn't wanted, but he turned and he began trudging up the lane again. He went up to the top of the hill and he looked down across the valley, and there's nothing. No lights at all. The wind was blowing. The snow was coming. There's no other place for him to shelter except that farm. So he turned around and went back. He knocked on the door again. The farmer opened the door and said, I told you, clear away. I don't want you. There's nothing else. Oh, please let me stay. No, go away. Slammed the door in his face. Well, the Piper turned, not knowing what else to do. He got about 10 paces when the door opened again. Light spilled out. He looked back, and it was the wife of the farmer. Oh, now, Piper, now. You can stay the night in the barn. It is a terrible night. You can stay the night in the barn. Here's a lantern. Go stay the night in the barn. It'll be warmer than it is outside here. Now, you can make yourself a nice bed in the hay. Now, there are cows in there, but there's a black cow at the end. Stay away from the black cow. She bites. But you're welcome to stay the night. But you must be on your way before tomorrow morning. So the Piper thanked her, took the lantern, and he went into the barn. Oh, it was much warmer inside than it was outside, and there were stalls. And so he found a little empty stall, and he made himself a nice little bed in the hay. And he looked down. There was that big black cow at the end, looking at him. Stayed away from that black cow. But he pulled out those boots with frozen feet inside, and he found a brown cow who was sitting there contentedly. And he kind of shoved the boots underneath the brown cow to kind of warm them up and defrost them a bit. She didn't seem to mind. Well, he made himself a nice little bed in the hay in an empty stall, and he went to sleep. But he was up early the next morning, before the farmers woke up, because he knew he had to get out before that farmer woke up. Well, he reached on that brown cow, pulled out the boots, and sure enough, yes, the feet had been defrosted. He pulled out the feet, and he put on those boots. And they were a perfect fit. Oh, he was so happy. No more cold feet. And he began thinking, though, about what that farmer had treated him, how mean that farmer was. And he decided to go and play a little trick on that farmer. He took those frozen feet, took his old boots, put the frozen feet in his old boots, and he went up to that black cow, sat there looking at him, going. He put those boots right up next to the black cow, and he went out the back door. And he sat there looking through a small little window in the barn. And sure, didn't have to wait long. And sure enough, here came the wife of the farmer with her lantern. She came down, went into the barn to do her milking. Now, she didn't want to wake the Piper up, and let him sleep a little bit longer. And so she went into that barn, and she went down. She all started at the far end. And she went down toward, very quietly, not to wake the Piper, into the barn, down to the very end, to that black cow. And she went, oh, husband. She began screaming. Farmer came running in. Whoa, what's going on? Why are you shouting? The cow has ate the Piper. The cow ate the Piper. What do you mean the cow ate the Piper? Oh, the cow ate the Piper? What are we going to do? The cow ate the Piper. What are we going to do? The Piper was from Scotland. A terrible storm. The Piper was never here. What do you mean the piper was never here? The cow ate the piper. The piper was here. No, the piper was never here. What do you mean the piper was never here? The piper was never here. Oh, the piper was never here. Oh. So the farmer took a shovel, took those pair of boots with the frozen feet inside, went outside, dug a hole, put the boots and the feet inside the hole, covered it up, tamped it down. So, the piper was never here. Ah, the piper was never here. Well, a couple went inside their home and decided to have a wonderful breakfast. Oh, they put together a fabulous breakfast. There was sausage and bacon and fresh baked bread and butter and tea and eggs. And there was even some fried tomatoes and mushrooms. Oh, it was a feast. And they're just about to sit down and tuck into their breakfast when all of a sudden they heard bagpipes. They looked at each other. They went to the window. They looked out. And there, standing on his grave, was the piper, playing his bagpipes, looking at them. Oh. And then he began marching toward the house. Oh, the farmer's wife and the farmer, they ran out of the house. And there was the piper chasing after them. Oh, they ran out of the gate. The piper was after them, playing furiously. Oh, they ran up the road. Oh, the piper chased them, playing. They got to the top of the hill. The piper continued to play. They ran down the hill and they kept running. And the piper stood at the top of the hill, playing furiously until they were out of sight. Oh, the piper laughed. And he went into the farmhouse, and there he saw this magnificent breakfast. Oh, sausage, bacon, bread, fresh butter, and tea, and tomatoes and mushrooms. Oh, he was about ready to sit down and tuck into this huge feast when there was a knock on the door. He didn't think it was the farmer and the wife coming back. Who could it be? He went up the door, he opened the door, looked out at a short little man. Red hair, red beard, blue eyes, looking up at him. Oh, he has icicles in his hair, icicles in his eyebrows, icicles in his beard. He said, "Oh, you look cold. Come inside, warm yourself by the fire. We have a wonderful breakfast. Come inside, put your feet up, warm yourself by the fire." And the short little man looked up at him and said, "Oh, thank you kindly. I'd love to come inside and warm my feet by the fire. That is, if I had any feet." Now it looks like we have time for one last story. This story comes from Japan. And in Japan, we also begin stories with Mukashi. Mukashi, aru tokoro ni. Once there was an old man, Jisan, and his wife, Obasan. Grandfather and grandmother, they lived in a little cottage up on top of a mountain. They didn't have much, and what they would do is they gather straw and they'd weave hats. And whenever they needed something, the old man would gather the hats and take them down to the valley below, to the village below in the valley, and sell them and trade whatever they needed. Well, it was 2 days before New Year's. And the old man said, it'd be nice if we had some mochi so we could celebrate, New Year's properly. "Oh, you silly old man, here, take these 5 hats and take them out of the village and trade them for mochi." So the next day, that's what the old man did. He got his wooden pack, he put those 5 hats in his pack, and down the mountain he went. Now, halfway down the mountain, there was a little shrine. And in the shrine, there were 6 statues. There were 4 little statues to Jizu, protector of children. The medium-sized statue was the god of the river, but the largest statue was the god of the mountain. Now, it was the custom of this old man that whenever he passed by, he'd offer little prayers, he'd make little offerings, and today was no exception. He clapped his hands twice to get the attention of the spirits. "Dear my friends, it is almost New Year's. I thank you for your blessings for this past year. I ask that you again visit your blessings upon my wife and myself for the coming year. Thank you very much. Happy New Year." And he went down the valley to the village. But when he got to the village, it was beginning to snow. A blizzard was coming, and everyone was rushing around, trying to get whatever they need to go back home before the snow really became heavy, and no one wanted to buy any hats. Well, at the end of the day, that old man, he gathered up his hats, and he went back up the mountain. But when he got to that shrine, "Oh, my friends, this will not do." and he went over to the statues, began dusting off the snow that had accumulated on their shoulders and on their heads. And then he got an idea. I know. He took off his pack, and he got 4 of those little hats, and he tied them onto the heads of the statues of Jizu, the protector of children. He took that 5th hat, and he tied it onto the head of the statue of the god of the river. But when he came to the god of the mountain, "Oh, my friend, I'm sorry. I have no hat for you." I know. And that old man, he took off his own hat, tied it onto the head of the statue of the god of the mountain, and said, "There you are, my friends. Happy New Year." And they turned, and he went back home. But without a hat, by the time he got home, he was almost frozen. "Oh, you silly old man, come inside. Warm yourself by the fire. Now, what happened?" And the old man told his wife what had gone on. And she said, "Well, we do not have mochi, but that is okay. We will be all right." They had their meager supper, and they went to bed. In the middle of the night, about midnight, they heard this knocking on the shoji screen door, on the rice paper screen door. "Oh, who could it be? It's the middle of the night. They lived up on a mountain. Who could it be?" They lit a lantern, and they went to that shoji screen door, and they opened it up and looked out. Oh! And there, standing on their doorstep, were 6 stone statues, all wearing little straw hats. And the largest of them stepped forward. It was the god of the mountain. "Thank you. Thank you for your compassion. We have brought gifts." And the 4 little statues of Jesus, the protector of children, all came with little mochis, rice cakes. "Mochi, that you may never know hunger." And the middle-sized statue of the god of the river came step forward with a bottle of rice wine, sake. "Sake, that you may always remember to enjoy the sweetness of life." And then the god of the mountain stepped forward. "And my gift to you, fine mountain tea. Now, that you may always have good health and long life. Happy New Year." And these 6 statues with these little straw hats on their heads turned, and they disappeared into the night. Now, this old man, this old woman, they just realized they had seen a miracle. Well, they decided to save the mochi and the sake for tomorrow, which was New Year's Day, to celebrate properly. But it was cold, so they boiled some water and they had some of that fine mountain tea. Oh, it was the best tea they ever had. Oh, it was wonderful. And they snuggled into the bed and they went to sleep. The next morning, that old man, he yawned and he stretched. He looked over at his wife and he went, "Oh, who is this woman?" I mean, the woman he was in bed with was not his wife, but the most gorgeous woman he had ever seen. "Oh, who are you?" And the old woman, she yawned and she stretched and she looked over and went, "Oh, who was in bed with her? It wasn't her husband, but the most handsome man she'd ever seen. Oh, who are you?" And that's when this elderly couple realized the true gift of the god of the mountain. He had restored to them their youth. And so on that New Year's Day, this new young couple had the mochi and they had the sake, and they vowed to each other that they would always remember to enjoy the sweetness of life. Thank you very much. Those are the stories I have for you today.
Thank you so much, Alton. It's always a pleasure to take us on that little tour around the world and share with us the many stories that you have. Someone was asking, how do you come up with all of these wonderful different voices that you do for the characters?
Character voices. I tell myself the story over and over and over again. And as I do so, I imagine what these characters look like, how they carry themselves, and how do I differentiate between them? So I have in my mind a picture of what these characters look like, how they behave, what's important to them. It's their backstory. I create their backstory so that I know how they kind of react and how they kind of carry themselves. And then as I tell the story, I say, oh, this is how they would sound. This is how they would look. This is how they would carry themselves. This is the relative size of these different characters. As the more I tell it and the more I use their voices, the more real they become to me. once they become real to me, I know I can make them real to everyone else.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Is there a particular element that you're looking for in a story, the ones that appeal to you, the ones that you end up sharing with audiences?
I read a lot of stories and I do a lot of research, and there are stories that kind of grab me. You know, there's something about them that resonates inside of me. Aborigines have a saying that stories are in search of tellers. And so that when I find a story that won't let me go, that kind of like there's something in it, that there's something important in there that I keep coming back to, I pay attention to that. And I read over the stories and I find out, more than often enough, there's something inside that story that either resonates with me, appeals to me, something with my memories of the past, or something that's important to me. And I pay attention to that. And I try and find that. To me, that's what I call the heart of the story. That is the thing that my lens, how I interpret that story and how I can tell that story from that place. And those types of stories, there's healing that happens. I pay attention to those types of little, I guess, reminders of things that keep pulling me to those stories. And those are the ones that I tell, because there's something inside of me that says, yes, this is important for me, and therefore maybe it might be important for someone out there.
Well, it's obvious that these stories have found a wonderful person to share them in you.
Thank you.
And that we're so lucky to have you be part of what we're doing here at Skep Live Online. And I want to remind everybody that Alton will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. again, and Thursday at 10 a.m. with more stories, different ones from, and if you haven't signed up for either one of those, please do so. You can email us at csinfo at hawaii.edu, and we'll send you the links for those. I also want to thank our sponsors once again, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, Kauanoa Senior Services, the University of Hawaii, and you, our audiences, for tuning in and watching. And with that, I want to wish everybody a safe and happy Tuesday, and stay safe, and aloha, everyone.
See ya.